I'm Morgan Ryan, 1455's creative director and design editor of movable type e-magazine, 1455's bi-monthly publication. I am thrilled to introduce the next featured artist today. Palestinian American poet, writer, editor, and community activist. She is currently the Poet Laureate of the City of Alexandria, Virginia, where she also volunteers for local organizations that advocate for the civil rights of vulnerable communities. It is an absolute honor to introduce to you Zeina Azzam.
Hello everyone, my name is Zeina Azzam and I'm a Palestinian American poet and writer, and currently I'm the Poet Laureate of the City of Alexandria, Virginia. I'm so delighted to be with you today and to be part of the 1455 Summer Festival. This is really very special, and I'm really grateful to Sean Murphy for inviting me to be part of this wonderful event. I have a few poems to read to you today, and they are, some difficult subjects about war and refugees and displacement, incarceration. I know these are sort of grim themes, but they are themes that we are facing, so many people in the world are facing today. And each poem is sort of a story in itself. I'll start with one titled Death in War. After the headlines, the photographs of still bodies in utter surrender, the stacking and burying in unmarked graves, don't turn away. Say a prayer for each farmer, teacher, bearded grandfather on a cane, mother whose scarf flies in the air, father staring at the ground. Think of the empty chairs at the dinner table, the shirt and socks missing from the clothesline. Remember each pair of hands that opened and closed, held a pencil, clapped with joy. And when the wheat and flowers they sowed reach toward the sun, bring water to these tenacious flags of presence on the land. The next poem I'm going to read is actually an ekphrastic poem. It was inspired by a painting of the Egyptian artist Ingi Eflaton. It's called Dreams of a Detainee. It's of a woman sitting in a jail cell looking out the bars. Ingi Eflaton was an Egyptian painter and political activist, especially in the women's movement. She was a leading spokeswoman for the Marxist, progressive, nationalist, feminist movement in the late 1940s and 50s, as well as a pioneer of modern Egyptian art. She was one of the more important Egyptian visual artists. In my small sky, if I reach outside these bars, will my arm find freedom? Will my palm pretend float on my breath like a lark, a wave in my small sky? If I think deeply about you in your cell, will our visions of open chains interweave? Will two threads mesh as a coiling helix and embrace? If I chew the stale bread long enough, will its taste conjure the wheat fields and farmers in my village, bending sunward from rising to setting, guided by toil and light? If I pull the pins from my hair, will that feeling of lightness cascade down my back, wash over me like a waterfall, clear, unfettered, escaping the river? If I gaze hard at the faraway wall, will my eyes relearn how to focus beyond the bars, strain to see more than dirt, stains, rats, gray water, a scab, remember a generous cloud? If I turn away from my jailer, will jasmine from my garden visit me? Will I plant it behind my ear? Will words blossom in my throat to write a new anthem for my country? A Syrian refugee speaks. To you, I am the story on the evening news. My charcoal mane braids mystery with fear. My words push eyes to narrow, backs to rise. Others dole out largesse at borders, to me a wingless bird to feed. You note my brown skin, imagine my kin as the reclining odalisks in Delacroix's painting, the boy charming a snake in Jerome's. My life is a tale of once upon a time, 1,001 ruses, myth and mirror fused by the heat of the hell of war. To me, I am the history book and the poem, the suckling and the breast, the amulet locating paradise, Al-Jannah. It lies at the feet of mothers. Now our country is an empty womb, tales of fleeing tattooed on our skin, white flags carried out of houses buried in rubble. Each time I beseech the crescent moon for a blessed month, I seek signs of stone houses and olive trees left behind. I wait for the morning that will bring back mother's milk, a scent of jasmine, the dignity of home. I grew up with parents who were Palestinian refugees. They fled Palestine during the war in 1948 when the State of Israel was established. And they fled to Syria, then Lebanon, and then we settled in the United States. So the refugee story was very much part of my upbringing, my heritage. It's the story that I learned very early on. And I watched my parents grow old as refugees, and that was really, very interesting, very sad, really, to see how refugees grow old with their stories, how their stories sort of evolve and but also settle heavily on their hearts. This poem is titled "A Refugee Grows Old." From my mother. She is surprised by the pink cyclamen in the pot, examines the foreign petals, upswept as if reaching toward another place. Her own journey seems muted now, details as far away as her childhood in Palestine, where in one scenario she would have lived in the same place until great-grandchildren played around the lemon tree that defined her family's house in scent and space. Where in the real scenario, she fled for her life with a husband and baby, in her pocket a key that rusted over the years. Her memories are like henna on a hand, splendid arabesques fading each day, until gone. She has covered so many miles by boat, plane, car, on foot, measured by oceans and clouds, gas fumes, tattered flags left behind, driver's licenses, rental agreements, goodbyes to friends and family, a lifetime unanchored, cleaved. She continues to worry that someone is plotting to take away her home, while slowly hunching over a downswept, bent flower, weighed down by hallucinations. She knows some things never leave you, so you have to leave them yourself. Take small steps away, looking for some peace. My mother died in 2019, and I wrote this poem after she died. You could tell yourself. You could tell yourself almost anything, that when you look at your mother on her deathbed, you say, well, she had a full life. You see that her diaphragm is no longer rising from a sacrum once rife with life, and it makes you wonder about her final breath. Is it still in the room, and can you breathe it in too, carry it in your veins? You know that her favorite blouse is scissored open in the back for easy dressing, and it makes you consider which of your own clothes you will die in, which ones will be given away to strangers. You could tell yourself that these are ephemeral things, that living to the fullest is what's important. And then you ask, what does that mean? There are songs on the shelf that make your tears flow, books that tell of journeys toward an inner heaven or one beyond. There are the good deeds that maybe made someone's life better. Then there is this love that overwhelms you, for her, for your brother who with you is the only one left, for your children who you are terrified might also die before you. It sits heavily like the thick roots of an old tree, its high branches and leaves trying to fly. You want to believe this love has a lightness like that too, that it will fly and last beyond your physical body and hers, that people remember the dead this way, despite the dark absence. You could believe it. And then you think of your mother on her deathbed, and you realize you do, that nothing is as important as loving, even if you cannot touch your loved ones after they die. You could then tell yourself that there are unnameable, invisible hands that will continue to open, close, flutter like leaves between you and your mother, and that maybe with the photographs and the memories that come when you close your eyes, that this is really all there is. After my mother died, my brother and I took her ashes to bury them in Nazareth, where my father's ashes are buried as well. That was her final wish, and as it was my father's. But in order to do that, we had to travel to Palestine and go through Israel, and we had to navigate some checkpoints with Israeli soldiers. This is the poem that's a story of how we got through one checkpoint. To the Israeli soldier who x-rayed and swabbed our mother's ashes. Even though you looked me in the eye, my peripheral vision was stuck on the machine gun cradled in your colleague's jittery arms next to me. Your questions were like jagged metal soldiers on a conveyor belt, a continuous barrage, the same sharp words coming steadily, marching toward my brother and me. All the supervisors who came, all those young military minds with colorful stripes, trained in war, but with no grasp of our grief, of a Palestinian heart, of a simple desire to return homeward. To you, these were just salt crystals in an engraved wooden box. You must run through the x-ray machine twice, swab all around, carry as if a purse a sack of books. To us, those were our mother's remains from an unholy world that kept her far away from her homeland for 71 years, made her a refugee everywhere she went. You will never know who our mother was. My brother and I would have told you that we were carrying what was left of her because you wouldn't let her living body come back. You wouldn't allow a refugee and her family to return to Nazareth. But after your razor-like interrogation ended and our halting answers were enough, we crossed your checkpoint and continued our journey. We buried her ashes in the Palestine she knew. Our Palestinian mother finally exercised her right of return. Thank you very much.